great to have the opportunity to come and learn from each other in that way. And I hope that what we're going to talk about this morning is going to build on what you heard already a few minutes together just a little bit ago. So my name is Matt Lake, and I'm currently the lead pastor at First Church in Williamsport, and I'm really grateful to be there. I'm going to give you an opportunity to get to know me a little bit better here based on some of the things that we're going to share. But before we do anything else, I just want to take a moment, and I want to ask us just to share together in a word of prayer. So would you join with me? Lord God, may this time be your time. Allow us now to be on holy ground, to be used for you. And Lord, this day may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable in your sight, shaking us to new life in you. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. I would venture to guess that a number of you have heard of something called the 5 love languages. If you've heard that anywhere along the line, can I see your hand a little bit? I had a feeling that that would be the case. Back in the mid-1990s, a guy named Gary Chapman wrote about 5 love languages, and over 10 million copies have been sold. And one of the things that's interesting to me about that is that love is not a new concept. We all experience love. So why did his book do so well? His book did so well because he broke it down into 5 categories of how people best relate to love. And I'm guessing that you've seen those somewhere along the way. And so here's what he talks about. Words of affirmation is a way to experience love. Quality time to experience love. Acts of service to experience love. Physical touch to experience love. Or receiving gifts is a way to experience love. And it's interesting that we would all say that we love in some capacity, but we all love or receive love better based on how we are uniquely wired, based on these 5 things behind me. So in my household, for my wife Jen and I, this was important to understand. Because I would be encouraging her all the time, and I would be affirming her all the time, and she'd get mad at me. And I'm like, what is wrong here? I'm affirming you all the time. And it took me a while to understand it's the acts of service and sometimes gifts that most express my love to her. Conversely, she would do things for me, and that was nice, but she would never encourage me. And it was driving me nuts. And so we kind of realized, hey, the best way that you can love me is just affirm me at times and give me some words of encouragement. That is what will fill me. It wasn't that we weren't loving each other. We just weren't best hearing or understanding the type of love that best spoke to our hearts. And so as we come together here this morning, I think it's a little bit like that when we're talking about communicating discipleship pathways in our congregations or with those that we walk with on a weekly or daily basis. Some of us hear differently. And so we can say something like, well, I'm going to put it in the newsletter. I'm going to put the discipleship pathway in the pastor's page. I'm going to have the pastor stand up and talk about the discipleship pathway, and we think that we're communicating. Only the reality is that form of communication will only hit some and will not hit others. And so really what our goal is going to be here for the next few minutes is to communicate what I would call in a surround sound kind of way. A discipleship pathway so that as many as possible might hear and might respond. And the idea being that if we communicate in all these different ways, hopefully at least one of the 5, and hopefully multiple of the 5, are going to hit people where they are, that they're actually going to care about this discipleship pathway. Now, before we go very far, we have to recognize a couple of things. First of all, there are some challenges to this surround sound concept to help people really hear about the discipleship pathway that we're talking about. First of all, here's a pretty obvious one. We have to have a discipleship pathway to talk about. And thankfully, Mike and Ken were already leading us through it that this morning, starting to get with us in that here this morning. If we don't have one, you can't talk about it. I realize that's a pretty obvious thing, but I just want to kind of put that out there. And I think some of the things that we're going to go through here in the next few minutes will help us if we don't have a discipleship pathway. You're going to learn a whole lot more through the rest of this day about a discipleship pathway. But I want to be really clear that what we're talking more about is how do you communicate so that people actually care about discipleship pathways. First thing is, make sure you have one, or at least know what you're aiming for. Secondly, communication is hard work. I don't know if you've noticed this in your setting, but even from when I began in ministry, people's lives and calendars and time are so much more full than they used to be. More and more people's calendars look like what you see there. So it's not so much even now that people might be aware that you have something to communicate about Discipleship Pathway, but what's going to make them care enough to say, I'm going to rearrange my schedule or use my time to be part of Discipleship Pathway? And let's just recognize this is hard work. We might have the most amazing product, pathway, process that we've started to talk about, but if people aren't willing or able to connect with it, we're going to run into issues. And we also know that not only are people's times and lives full, but we just talk right past each other. And so I just kind of love this example. So this is the candlelight dinner you promised me. You can just picture them having a conversation and they're just kind of doing one of these. So even when we try to communicate really clearly, odds are we're going to face the challenge with the people we're communicating with that we're going to be doing this at times. So we're just going to have to be super intentional and realize we're going to have to work hard to communicate. And the third one is this, that communicating information is hard enough. Getting the information out there is hard enough, but here's what we really have to understand. Getting people to care enough to get on board, to be a part of it, that's the real challenge. I don't understand. We put this out there 10 times. Everybody can even say on Sunday mornings we're going to be focusing on Discipleship Pathway. And yet hardly anyone is. What's the disconnect there? We've not communicated in a way to help them actually get on board, to actually care enough to enter into the Discipleship Pathway. So those are some of the challenges that we just need to face, and there's no magic bullet for this. There's no one easy thing to do. And so what we're going to do is just talk about some ideas that I hope that you can think about, pray about, take with you. But here's how we're going to do with our surround sound. We're going to talk about the why, the what, the how, the who, the when. That if we can touch on those 5 things on a consistent basis in our individual settings, that hopefully that will be communicating in a way that not only will they hear it, not only will they respond to it, but they'll care enough about it to get on board. Because again, we hear in different ways, just like we love in different ways. So the first one that I want us to understand, I'm so grateful that Ken and Mike started with this morning, because I think it's absolutely right. We have to communicate the why. If people do not care about a discipleship pathway, they will go no farther. So how do we communicate the why and what is really important? And one of the things I'd encourage you to do, so I'm guessing a lot of you have seen it, but if you get a chance, look at the Simon Sinek video on the golden circle, he calls it, and he talks about the why. And what he's talking about in that is many times in our churches we communicate the what, and I heard Mike say this morning, we communicate events. Everyone communicates events. The much harder work to do is to communicate the why. And I love one of the examples that Sinek gives is he says that when Martin Luther gave his speech, his famous speech, it wasn't, I have an 18-point plan. It was, I have a dream. And people connected with the dream. They connected with the passion. They connected with the why. And this is so incredibly important. Jesus was a master at this. Jesus constantly was out among the people in a very incarnational way, and he always used language that connected with people where they were in a way that it mattered to them. So when he's standing by a well, he talks to a woman, and when he's talking about the gospel and the kingdom of God, he uses language that's meaningful to her, and he uses living water language. But then he's with Nicodemus late one night, and it's dark, and Nicodemus is an academic. And when he's with Nicodemus, he says, here's what you got to do. You have to be born again in the kingdom of God. Same message, but he's communicating and he's using language that matters to those with whom he's communicating. So I want to help you understand here for just a moment, why should we care about a discipleship pathway? Why should that matter? I'm guessing that you all care about it to some degree, or you wouldn't be sitting here. Because there's a whole lot of people connected in our congregations who don't care. So let me tell you, at least from my vantage point, why you should care. This is my wife, Jen. I wish I could bring her with you today. I wish you had some time with Jen. She's awesome. Now, she drives me nuts at times, and I drive her nuts at times, but she's awesome, and I'm biased. I think she's beautiful. So since I can't bring her with me, everyone, this is my wife, Jen, all right? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Here are my kids, and somebody pointed out to me they don't look overly happy. Well, this was the first day of school this past year. Maybe that's why. But look there in the middle is my daughter, Alex. She turned 16 this past week. Please, yeah, sorry, exactly. Please pray for me, all right? I would value that. She's an awesome kid. She's in track and field right now. She just set a personal record for herself, both in triple jump and hurdles over the last couple weeks. I'm so excited for her. I love that. On the left there with the red backpack is our son Joshua. Joshua is in soccer. He's traveling today. He's at a soccer tournament with Jen. That's one of the reasons they can't be with me at the moment. And Josh scored his first middle school goal in soccer just 2 weeks ago. I'm so excited for Josh. He's awesome. And then there's my son Zach there on the right, and that cheesy grin says it all. If you know my son Zach, he is a full character, just of life and love and zest. He's also in soccer. He was also the starting point guard for the middle school basketball team this past year. So that's my kids. Love them. That's awesome. That's a little bit of my context. This is a little bit of my world. Now, I want to share with you a little bit of what Ken and Mike started to share with you. Just some statistics. That 80% of churches right now are plateaued or declining. 16% are maybe growing by addition. 4% could be considered replicating, having multiple campuses of some kind. Less than 1% growing by what we call the exponential or multiplying rate. Notice the 80%. That is a high number of churches struggling to just get by or slowly dying. Those are sad numbers. How about this? Currently in our culture right now, 20% of folks do attend church regularly in some format. 20% do not attend church, but they say that they do. We call them members, all right? 20% say they would attend with church if they were invited by a friend, and 40% are just not going to walk into church on Sunday morning. So even conservatively, 60% of folks are not connected on Sunday morning in church in any way. Those are sad numbers. Here are some that really get me. 6,000 to 10,000 churches a year are closing in the United States. 6,000 to 10,000. 1 in 4 individuals have no church connection, and they never did. That means these are people who didn't even grow up in the church. And then if you look at the next one, 38% of the American population is considered post-Christian, meaning maybe they went to vacation Bible school as a kid, maybe they grew up in the church, but now that they're adults, they're not going. But here's what's really interesting. That number rises to almost 50%. Almost 50% for age 30 and under. Can I say to you this morning, those numbers should crush us. They should hurt. I don't know how you are, but I look at those numbers and I tend to be like, oh, that's too bad. That's sad. I might even be a little bit angry. They should be in church. What are they thinking they're doing? But they should crush us. Because you know what this means? According to these statistics, at least one of my 3 beautiful kids will not come to know that which I am giving my life. Even more importantly, according to these statistics, it's more likely that 2 of my 3 kids will not know that which I'm giving my life for. I'm not okay with that. We can't be okay with that. Because those 50% age 30 and under, or the 38%, these are our nieces and our nephews and our kids and our grandkids and our neighbors and the people that we love and care about, not knowing that which we say we are giving our life to. It's not okay. Do this for just a moment. I want to ask you while you're here, you can hold on to your pens or pencils for a second if you want to, but I want you just to think for a moment in your own life. It could have been when Jesus first became real to you. It could have been sometime more recently. But I want you to think for just a moment, right now. When was a time in your life when Jesus became real, and beautiful, and extravagant? When was the first time, or a significant time, that grace dawned on you? And you realized never encountered anything more beautiful, wonderful, spectacular, graceful. No one has ever accepted me more than the love of Jesus. One of the reasons I love Jen, she knows all the filth, and there's a lot about me. She loves me infinitely. Jesus does that to the infinite degree. And we're saying, I choose to not care. Or I choose to not do everything I can in my limited human power to help those 48% come to know that changing, life-saving love. This is our why. My kids are my why. My neighbors are my why. So church, as me speaking to our church, we are going to do everything we can. We're going to put a discipleship plan, pathway, journey in place so that those numbers start to go down. Because I can't live knowing that we didn't try our absolute best. Do you hear some of the urgency, some of the why behind why we have discipleship journey and pathway? If we don't have the why, this just becomes another program that we're attempting to do. And what I love about Jesus, again, is that he was such a master of this. So he's showing up at wells, and he's speaking words of life. And he's out on the boat and teaching to lake shores and sharing words of life. And he's talking to those academics, and he's saying these new words of life that they had been missing through all of their programs. I'm not about programming. My daughter just turned 16. Almost half my life is over. I don't have time to play church. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything I can so that these guys know that life. And a discipleship pathway is a key way to do that. How can I help my kids go through each step of the discipleship pathway to know that what we just talked about and what you have felt in your own life? Passion is key to the why. Really quick, anybody know this lady? Anyone know that lady? Her name is Wendy Cobb. What if I came to you here this morning and said, hey everyone, I have a great idea. I'd like you to take 2 years off of your current situation. I'd like you to go into the inner cities. I'd like you to work for low pay. I'd like you to have hardly any resources at your disposal. How about we put you in the most difficult situations in our broken cities around our country? Go to it, go figure it out. And by the way, minimum pay. Again, how many signed up? Not too many. Yeah, maybe a couple. Sorry, I feel like a challenge. This is Wendy Cobb. She started Teach for America. And the last time I checked, only 15% of students graduating from the best colleges in our country were accepted to do Teach for America. And what is Teach for America? To go into, for a 2-year commitment, to the inner cities, to the most broken places, to give your best, to pour yourself out in the most difficult of situations. Why? Because Wendy Cobb has presented the why so powerfully, so passionately, so articulately. She says to them, you can change a child's life. And through that child, you can change a city's trajectory. And people are signing up like crazy to the point they only accept 15%. So if we're having trouble getting people into these discipleship pathways, I think a large reason for it is because we're not communicating our why. We've got to start there. We could spend a whole lot more time on this morning, but I'll make sure that we get through the other ones because our time is a little bit limited. That is part of the surround sound. Communicate the why. We also then have to communicate the what. So it is great to have a heart for this. It is great to speak with passion about it. But if we don't then have anything to invite them into, if we don't communicate the what and help folks get into that, we're again not going to make any progress. So one of the reasons I asked you on your tables this morning, you should have gotten one of these sheets. I put it up here on the screen for you. I loved again what Mike and Ken said. We have to create our own discipleship pathway. All I'm giving you here this morning is one example of, and it's what we use in our particular church context. And I didn't know that Ken and Mike were going to say this, but I was so grateful when he said, it doesn't have to be flashy, just call it step one. I was like, yes, that's what we've done, because I'm not creative enough to come up with something better. So there it is, a step one. And just real quick, the concepts here, again, I didn't talk with Mike and Ken about this, but the concepts directly overlap. So very quickly for us, step one is just getting people connected to God and to each other. Functionally, this is our membership, joining the church, and we try not to even say membership, full discipleship process. That's the first step. Once folks have done, and that's That's only 4 sessions for us. That's a lower commitment level. Our goal is to make it, we're as clear as what it can be on what it means to be a disciple of Christ, but we try to make the entry as easy as possible. Once we do that, we then encourage people to go through what we call the Discovering God's Path, and that's God's path for them. So what are your gifts? What are your passions? How are you going to start to live them out? How are you going to use those gifts to make a difference in the lives of those around you, and in our community, in this church, all those kinds of things? We help people dive more deeply into that, and we call that Discovering God's Path 6 sessions that we do. And I should also be very clear here, the one caveat I would add to this is that in our setting, this is about creating what we call multiplying disciples. We encourage everyone to know Jesus Christ. But for some reason in the life of the church, we have made being saved in Jesus Christ the end point instead of the beginning point. And so, to know Jesus Christ, you can define discipleship in all kinds of ways, but one way we know that you are maturing is that you're helping lead others to Christ as well. And every follower, disciple, should be doing the same thing. So we call this for us multiplying discipleship. The third step then is that what we call embracing God's call. So you're starting to get an idea in your life based on your passions and where you are and what your heart is for. What kind of call does God have on your life? And we spend a lot of time in this one. It is 12 sessions, and each one of these sessions, by the way, except for step 1, are 2 hours long. And in this, what we do is we try to teach a lot with our folks about what it means to be a multiplying disciple. We help them understand scripturally the kind of DNA that we are supposed to have as followers of Jesus Christ. And then we zone in on where they're being called and work to set them free. And then the fourth one here is to go and transform the world. And the idea is that if somebody gets to this step or this stage, we feel that they have the DNA of First Church enough in every way. Go with our blessing and do what God is calling you to do. And God will do some great things out of that. Now, sometimes I have people ask me on this. I want to be clear, we encourage folks to do this, but they're only going to take this step when they're ready. So after you've taken step 1, we encourage you to do step 2, but they'll do that in their own time, same with step 3. And honestly, we're still working our way through step 4. But what I want to point out here this morning is that step 1 happens multiple times throughout the year. You can join the church at various times. Step 2 only happens in the fall of the year. Step 3 only happens in the spring of the year. And then step 4 becomes an ongoing kind of thing. I share that with you just to say, part of that, all of that, is our what. So maybe somebody's ready for step 2 this year, and they're not ready to go to step 3. Okay, maybe next year we can get them. Or maybe the year after that, or maybe the year after that. The other thing, very quickly, I'd say to you, is this is kind of what's happening with this discipleship pathway. The most people will do step 1, less people do step 2, less step 3, less step 4. But by the time you get to step 4, we believe you are equipped to be a multiplying disciple to go out and start doing the same process all over again with other individuals so that it becomes a replicating kind of thing. Just to put some numbers in front of you if this helps you at all, because honestly, we're still working through this. A lot of this is really new and fresh for us. Over the last couple of years, we've had a couple hundred folks end up who have joined in the life of the church. So in step 1. Step 2, we've had a little over 100 who've been willing to take that step. And then, and I want to be really clear on this, we try to be as clear as we can on the what, that this is a commitment. We're trying to raise our expectations. So even though over 100 different folks have taken step 2, only about 24 are in step 3. And honestly, I don't know how many of them are going to go to step 4. But I'll tell you this, if we get even 3 people who I believe is a step 4, a level 4 leader, I will be thrilled. Because these are folks who have been trained and equipped to go. And that's incredibly exciting for me. So what are we doing to put the what out there? What are we sharing in our discipleship journey? Some people eat up information. So maybe you're a person, you're like, this is kind of so boring. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Please know there are some people who love information. Maybe this is the way they will finally hear it. Here's what we also have found surprisingly to be helpful with this. It seems to be a way to help people cut through the chaos and clutter of their life. To literally say to them, take step 1. There is something about that in the craziness of their life, they're like, we can do this. And here's how this became evident to us. We had a different process for a while, inviting people to join the life of the church, and we were having some people do that. As soon as we started this process, in the last 2 times that we've done step 1, they've effectively been the largest membership classes we've had since I've been there. I don't know if that's a coincidence, or is it just helping? They're finally hearing it in a way they can understand. Take the first step. So that's important for us to consider. We also want to understand this. We want to communicate the how. And so here's what I want you to think about with this. I think this is really important. When we talk about this communication factor, I think a lot of times we make it really irrelevant and really flat and really boring. So for example, look with me up here. In the 1950s, this was a typical car ad. How were they trying to communicate their product? There's a picture, but then there's just a whole bunch of words, right? Information was the primary way they were trying to get them to buy their product. However, this is not very often how people buy cars anymore. Yes, there are people that will check out every detail of the car, but more and more there's been a shift away from written information, tons of words, to having an experience. So compare what you see here. I'm going to ask for help here in a moment. We're going to put this video up, I hope. Compare what you see here to an advertisement that was shown during the Super Bowl of this year.
Come on. We gotta get out of here. Must go faster. How do you like it now, my friend?
Would you like to take it for a test drive?
I just did.
I love that example of that. I've watched that many times. Every time I watch it, I love seeing what they're doing there. There we go. So the reason I show you that, though, is there's a significant difference in how the two were presented. So my question is, how can we communicate in a way that's not flat, that's not just a bunch of irrelevant words? How can we communicate this discipleship journey or pathway or process to say this is an experience? And it's an experience that will grab you and change your life and be used to change the lives of others. How can we do that? I don't have a perfect answer for you on that. This is all trial and error in so many ways. But here's a couple suggestions that I hope are helpful to you. It helps my brain to think of the how in terms of systemic and organic. And what I love about this that's helpful to me again is that if you think about a DNA helix, there's two strands. So if you got the systemic is one strand and the organic is one strand, and they're united together in communicating the how and sharing the why, new life begins to emerge. And so for me, that's just a helpful thing to be thinking about. Here are some of the hows then that we can apply. And again, our ultimate goal here is to get to the place of sharing the experience in a full surround sound, three-dimensional, experiential way. To me, this is the more boring side, but we need it. This is important. So sometimes people want to know practically how can we communicate this. Here's a whole bunch of ways from a systems, from an institution side of how we can communicate. And again, this is the easier way to communicate. So how are we going to talk about our discipleship pathway or our disciples' journey? We're going to make Sunday announcements about it. We're going to be preaching on it, so talk to your pastors about it. Yes, we're going to have it printed in the newsletter or in the bulletin. We're going to put flyers out. I'm going to just pass the flyer out for you as one example there with our 4 steps on it. Use your system or your people to create a video about it if you're able to do that. Electronically send out emails about it so people can know. In your staff meetings, make sure you're talking about it. Again, I love what Mike and Ken shared this morning. This is not a once and done thing. It's a process that we live into on a continual basis. That will only happen if it's in the DNA with your church leadership. So talk about it with your staff or with your key volunteers, whichever one it might be. I don't know what all forms of communication you have. Make sure discipleship pathway journeys are in all of it. Make formal invitations. You are all invited to a life-changing experience of intentionality that we're going to be moving into in the next couple weeks. Clear your calendars. All of you are invited. So put it out that way. Make it part of your church calendar or cycle. Make sure your systems, the rest of the things, line up. It took us a long time in our setting. Literally, it took us about a year to get to a place among all our ministries to say, step 2 will happen in the fall. Everyone good with that, in alignment with that? Step 3 will happen in the spring. Everybody good with that? Can we arrange things to make that happen? It took us a long time. Use your Facebook page, either personally or the church one. Require every staff person or key volunteer or your administrative council to bring at least 3 people into the discipleship process. That is something that we can mandate, for lack of a better term, or at least encourage. And again, work towards that ministry integration and alignment. I just give you those to say those are a whole bunch of hows of how you can communicate. However, to me, this is both the easier one and maybe the less, it's the more tangible one. Because we also, and this is to me what feels, this organic part is what takes us from the flat 1950s advertisement to the experiential advertisement we just watched a few moments ago. There has to, in our culture, become something organic where we truly hunger for discipleship, which is why we go back to the why over and over and over. These are your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews. We have to hunger for this. Pray, pray, pray. You can be as excited as you want to be, but if the Holy Spirit isn't at work on people's hearts, it's going to be tough. So pray. It's got to be personally owned in the church. We have to understand collectively, this is not for the super spiritual Christians. This is for everyone. This is our norm. I don't know what it's like in your setting, but a lot of times for us, it sort of becomes one of those, well, only the really mature disciples take a Bible study or 2. No, it's what a normal disciple does. So understanding that and embracing that. There does become something contagious about it as people start to go through it and understand how important it is, how relevant it is, how life-changing it is, what an impact it can have. They become your best advertisers. There's a contagious nature that begins to occur. Share testimonies of how this process is making a difference in people's lives over and over and over. Require those who are going through a step 2 or a step 3 or step 4, tell them, you now know what this is like. We need your help. Go back and bring somebody into step 1, step 2, step 3. Make personal invitations. We put the plea out like I just did a little bit ago. Hey everyone, we're going to be starting this in a month. We hope you'll all come. I also personally invited at least 10 or 15 people, a fairly long email. I see something in you. I would love to partner more in ministry with you. We're going to be leading this time. I know you're really busy, but would you consider setting aside time and us journeying together through this step? If you can't, I totally understand, but boy, I'd love it if you take a step out of your comfort zone and join me. That's organic. It's not just top down. Embrace side by side. Those who are going through it are going to nudge and tap their peers on the shoulder and just be creative. Have fun. How can you creatively share this with everybody? Systemic is top down. Somebody can make a decision and institutionally implement it. That is needed. Organic, though, is bottom up, and this is the harder one because it's all about our culture, which again comes back to the why. As you think about that, the key then is to do all of this over and then over and then over and then over again. It's not a once and done thing. It becomes a way of life. So just one example here. I want to show you this example here. This is one of the ways for us. To you, it's not going to mean a whole lot. It's a flat picture on a screen. But for us, this is one of those 3D surround sound, cool commercial moments. The guys on the right, Mitch, Alex, Ryan, because they had matured in their discipleship to the place of building a relationship with Mylon, who's being baptized. And because of that relationship, reached out to him, because they had matured in their discipleship enough, he came to know Christ as well. Mylon had not stepped foot in the church facility for 10 years. Those 3 guys to the right met him at the gym that they work in, or go to, I should say. And through intentionality in their discipleship, built enough of a relationship with Milan that Milan made the choice that he wanted to be baptized. We have lifted this up over and over and over again in our setting. And I can't tell you how many people, when they see this and they hear Milan's story of not being in the church for 10 years and wanting to be this place of taking a step, and we can say, you know why that's happening? That is an example of multiplying discipleship, which is what these steps in the discipleship journey pathway are all about. Look at the impact you can have. It's not a burden. It's the joy that Mike and Ken were talking about before. That's what I want to be a part of. It is life impacting and life transforming. And it is awesome and so exciting and so wonderful. That's one of the things that we lift up over and over again. And so, the last thing I would just say with you on this, Jim Collins talks about the concept of the flywheel. So, you do the why, you get to the what, you communicate the how. I don't even talk about when and who. You know the when and who. It's whenever you set the times to gather, and it's whoever you get to be a part of it. We don't even need to talk about that. But once you go through that cycle, what are you going to do? You're going to start all over again, and again, and again. And at first, the cycle's going to take a long time and a lot of effort. But then the second time through, it's going to be a little bit better and easier because it's part of your culture. And the third time, a little bit more. And each time, it's going to go a little faster, picking up momentum, and it becomes part of your culture and church. So for you, for us today, what do you feel like, what do you know you most need to be communicating when it comes to the discipleship pathway? If you don't have a heart for this, it's the why. Or, if you get to the what, and you don't have the discipleship pathway, the first step of communication is creating that. And then you start to figure out how are we going to share this repeatedly with the who and the when. And I hope that's at least one takeaway that you can take with you. And again, I would just say from my vantage point, that all begins with the why. So I'm going to show you here just to end our time, and then we'll have a little bit of time for any conversation or questions if you want. I hesitate to do this. One, because I don't think you have to do this. Two, I feel very vulnerable to do this. There's a video I want to show you, and it's talking about our step 4. It's only 2 minutes long. But I'm showing you this because in our setting, it's not an overly complicated video. I think any of you can do this, or a lot of you can do it. And secondly, it'll just give you an idea in our setting. This isn't like super well done. It's not the most amazing thing. The reason for my hesitation, there's a couple extreme close-ups of my face that I absolutely hate, all right? So I'm just going to put that out there. At the very least, you can have, if it means nothing else to you, you can have a good chuckle over this, all right? But I know for me, I tend to learn best by example. And so here's just one example that I want to give you to be able to do that. So I'll try this one more time. We have one video work. See if we can do this one as well.
We've been talking together about what it means to go on a disciples' journey with one another. Step 1 was simply saying yes to God and yes to God's people and being connected with them. Step 2 involved discovering God's path for your life on what it means to be not just a disciple, but a multiplying disciple of Jesus Christ. And then step 3 involved embracing that call, embracing that identity of being a multiplying disciple. But what happens when you've done those things? What happens when you're starting to live in such a way that you're impacting the lives of those around you? The 4th step that we're inviting you to be a part of is to be a multiplying disciple that goes out and literally transforms the world. How does that occur? It occurs when we embrace our identity in Christ to such a degree that God gives us the ability to go out and influence the lives of others in very significant ways, whether with individuals in a deep way or with the masses in a quantitative way. When my friend a while back invited me to do the trail running that I had never done before, I was never more sure that I wanted to do another trail race than the moment I finished that hard, tough first course. And when I felt the euphoria, the joy of completing that race, I so desperately wanted to and did go out and start recruiting other people to say, you have got to be a part of this. And in essence, I went back to step 1 with other people, just helping them to say, yes, I'll try the journey of trail racing. In essence, that's what we are called to do as Christ followers, that once we've said yes and once our life is fully embraced in Jesus Christ, we too go back and join others in their walk in life, and we share with them in such a way that their life is transformed in Christ and they come on the same journey that God has just brought us through. Again, is it the most easy thing? No. Are we naturally going to find time for it? No. So we intentionally stop and pray and say, God, here we are. And when we do that, God does incredible, incredible things with a surrendered soul. God transforms the world through surrendered souls. And there's nothing more fulfilling than that. So will you join us on this journey? Will you say yes to God and what God has in store for us? Will you say yes to being a transformer, a multiplying disciple for the purposes of Jesus Christ? I so look forward to being on this journey with you, and I can't wait to see where all God takes us together. Let's join the journey.
So again, I don't think I realized the first time I saw that how extreme the close-ups were, but you get the idea with that. And my hope, very simply, is you do what you need to do in your setting. Be as creative and intentional as possible to do what we've just been talking about through this morning. So what I'll do is I think time is tight with our lunches. Yes. Great. I'm going to let Beth, she's give us an announcement here in just a moment. And I know that this is the seating area for lunch. So it's really important that we do that very close to being on time. What I will do is if you do happen to have any questions, I'll just be hanging around up here for a few minutes. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have. More than anything, my hope, like at least for me in these kind of days, I need something to take away. And my hope, and my hope of a takeaway for all of us today is that when we go through those 5 areas, which one of the 5 would we do a better job of helping communicate in regard to the discipleship pathway, and use that as a starting point to get to all the things that we're going to be learning about the rest of today with Mike and with Ken.